Well, I'm really sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm a real pleasure to be able to talk to you about what I think of as a very important topic. I've, as the introduction just mentioned, I've long been concerned with the determinants of the quality of the information ecosystem. Uh, not presence of asymmetries of information, and now concerns about mis and disinformation. And so this talk is on the impact of AI and digital platforms on the information ecosystem, and it's a joint paper with Maxim Ventura-Bolet. So um, this is a caricature of the information ecosystem prior to the arrival of AI. We had content producers like newspapers, later on websites, TV, radio, and they produced information that was consumed by consumers. Um, they competed with each other for the production of high quality information. Information is a public good, something I'm going to emphasize over and over again. The presentation of this high quality information generated visits from consumers, and that generated revenue partly through subscriptions, but also importantly through ads. So the business model depended on attracting visits. The consumers, for the most part, got information at little or in many cases no direct cost. There was no optimality in the system. We should be clear. This particular arrangement did not necessarily produce the the efficient level of information, but the system more or less worked. Now we want to know, how does AI change that? So at first blush, you would think AI is great. It improves the information efficiency. It's easier to disseminate and learn information. And that by itself would have improved the quality of the information ecosystem. But there's something else going on. If the way the system is organized has the result that it lowers the value of information, or at least what the information producers receive, it will change producer incentives. That's a point that I made in a paper almost a half century ago, pointing out that if financial markets were informationally efficient, there would be no incentive for anybody to collect information, and therefore, while the system might be informationally efficient, the only information that would be conveyed in the system would be information that was costless. And so it would not be a very good information system. And this is where AI comes in, and the digital platforms, because they change what the content producers can appropriate of the value of the information. So as an example, in the chart just illustrated there, the AI, or a digital intermediary, scrapes data off of the content producers, and consumers find it much easier to interact with the AI intermediary rather than with the content producers. But that means that the content producers won't be able to appropriate the returns to their production of information, and therefore they'll be producing less information. And so the information going into AI will be poorer, and the information, therefore, that consumers get will be poorer. So it's already evident in the digital platforms have disrupted the business model, and we anticipate things will of the legacy media, and we expect things to get even worse. There's another phenomenon that we're going to emphasize. and that is the relative cost of low quality information falls. Um, and that's a particular aspect that is special to AI. So the fundamental question that we ask in this paper is, under what circumstances will society become more or less informed? Will the information ecosystem get better or worse? Um, Now, zooming in on the issue of mis and disinformation, AI lowers the cost of effective disinformation that is believed. Examples are deep fakes, scams, very hard to detect. And here's the point: it may be more profitable than producing high quality information. There may be actors who get non-pecuniary benefits from disinformation. Uh, there are anti-vaxxers who deeply believe vaccines are bad, and they're willing to spend money, resources, to persuade others of that. During elections, Russia has often intervened in elections of a number of cases. Um, and The problem is that improvements in the ability to produce deepfakes may occur more rapidly than improvements in AI's ability to detect deepfakes. And this is analogous to the ongoing debate about the ability to make drones that cannot be detected and the ability to detect drones. We sometimes call this the drone warfare effect. So here's the general problem. Information is a public good that is largely privately provided. Private incentives are not well aligned with public interest. The extent to which that is the case is affected by technology, and we'll be looking at the new technology, AI, and by public policy. We'll ask the question, are there ways of changing taxes, regulation, legal framework that can ameliorate some of the adverse effects of what AI is doing? And our concern is the extent of the problem may be particularly severe for certain kinds of information where up-to-date quality news is very relevant. So what uh, our NVR paper does is construct a simple model of the information ecosystem along the lines I've just outlined, shows the various kinds of equilibria that can emerge, demonstrates that changes in technology like AI and digital platforms may change the equilibrium in a way that is adverse, leads to a worse information ecosystem, and identifies circumstances under which it is more likely that the equilibrium will be characterized by less high quality information and by more dis and misinformation. And the end of this talk, and I gather we have a hard stop, where we'll identify a few policy actions that might improve matters. Um, so I'm going to go very quickly to illustrate the model, where the model, as I said, has producers of information, the legacy media, and they can produce truthful and untruthful information. And the cumulative state of knowledge in terms of truthful information and untruthful information is summarized by a state variable Q, and it increases when we invest in the acquisition of information, but the value of old information deteriorates over time. That's why we're talking about news, the kinds of information that we're interested in here is news. It's not like the laws of physics where they don't change over time. And then we have consumers, and the critical thing here is there are two types of consumers: some who have a technology, we call it a perfect screening technology that can tell lies from misinformation, and the other group who cannot. At any cost. And this is obviously an extreme assumption, but it simplifies and we can generalize it. So the critical thing here is getting consumer attention. So we call this the minutes function, the minutes that people spend looking at the screen and looking at the media. And that's a function of the technology, gamma, the amount of information, both truth and lies, and the flow of new real information for the informed people and the total flow of information for the uninformed people who can't tell the difference. So, and then we have a natural allocation of the minutes across producers in proportion to the flow of information. And not all consumers, not all the time is spent, of course, visiting producers. And then the revenue is proportional to the visits, whether by informed or uninformed consumers. And that generates a revenue function. And the decisions, we look for a Nash equilibrium where the producers of truthful and untruthful information both choose the optimal flow. That is going to be obviously a balancing between the marginal revenue they get and the marginal cost. So the cost function is critical, and the key here is it's a function of the state of information and the technology, and is increasing and convex in the magnitude of the flow of new information. And the costs are independent of the choices made by other producers. So they maximize, as one would have expected, the ranks, and that gives us a flow of information from each of them. And then what is critical for the quality of the information system is in part the share of untruthful information at any time. We sometimes call it a degree of polarization, because the people who are informed live in one world where they see truthful information, and people who are uninformed live in another world. And then we characterize the various forms of the equilibrium. One of the forms that's particularly interesting is the case where everybody only truthful information is produced. And this is a diagrammatic solution to the equilibrium level of in that case where there's only truthful information. And this shows the critical result that we have, that a change in the technology by reducing the incentives for production of new information shifts that curve down. And even though information acquisition dissemination is more efficient, the equilibrium level quality of information ecosystem actually decreases. It goes from Q0 T star to Q1 T star. So an improvement in technology leads to a worse information ecosystem. We then do a welfare analysis to ascertain whether society is better off because there's obviously a savings by having a more information system, but we're able to show conditions under which there's an unambiguous decrease in welfare. Now, there are some other equilibria, and I won't go through the math because we only have, I want to go through the policy, but there are equilibria where both truthful and misinformation is produced, and then there's an untruthful equilibrium. So the key takeaway of the model is that strong informed consumer demand leads more likely to have a truthful equilibrium, relatively expensive to lie, and high screening capacity. All those lead to truthful, and then low-informed consumer demand, relatively cheap to lie, and low screening capacity lead to untruthful equilibrium. So effectively, we do a comparative statics analysis to try to figure out which of these emerges. So the key takeaway is once you account for broken incentives, the information ecosystem may be left significantly worse off. Finally, we want to talk about some of the key policy recommendations. We don't just simply have to accept these adverse outcomes. And we divide our recommendations into two parts. One is how do we increase the supply of good information? And secondly, how do we reduce the supply of mis and disinformation? So increasing the supply of good information, one of them is to make the AI and digital platforms pay producers for using information, effectively enforcing intellectual property rights, not allowing the AI companies to get away with the notion that they can just steal information and get away from fair usage kind of provisions, which were designed for totally different purposes. And when one does this in a decentralized way, one has to take account of the asymmetries in bargaining power, something that, for instance, Australia, when they designed its bargaining code, was very explicit about. The second one is rather than just leave it to the firms to negotiate, which is very costly and will get disparate outcomes. One of that is just to make an assessment, public assessment, of the value, how much of the profits of the digital companies comes from taking information from other people and imposing a tax, a digital tax on these, and using that in part at least to support legacy media. And that is the third part, public support for media, public provision of news. So all of this is ways of increasing the supply of good information. Some of this is occurring in various countries. The second one is reducing mis and disinformation. And here, I think part of the issue is ensuring accountability. And that was where Section 230 was so corrosive, which ensured them lack of accountability. Punishments for fake information, not taking down scams, forcing them to disclose algorithms of how information is being promoted, reducing some of the asymmetries of information which give the social media and AI companies some advantages in distribution of mis and disinformation. Again, different countries have moved forward on this. Europe's DSA, some of the things UK is doing, and other parts of the regulatory landscape for digital are attempts to deal with this. So looking ahead, there is the possibility that transformative AI might not only be a processor, but also a generator of information. My friends who are advocates of AI say that. But even if that were the case, there are severe risks on the path towards transformative AI. While AI is eroding the producer business model, but not yet generating its own high quality information. So there are two possible futures. One, a rather gloomy one. We don't get there. AI is a universal interface for information retrieval. And why fund regional reporting or research if the value is captured elsewhere? And the other one is we do get there. We achieve transformative AI. AI is a fully transformative investigator. A handful of actors, there are some downsides on this, where a handful of actors could control the models that generate, validate, and disseminate information. And then the question we have to ask is how to manage this concentration of power. Well, thank you. And we have a few minutes for questions, just a few, I gather.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Let's have a round of applause for Joe. Let me ask the first question while the audience members are thinking about theirs. It's my understanding, Joe, that you have put information into the objective functions of agents. So they're actually optimizing over information and derived equilibrium results on that. How do you think about putting information into, if I understood correctly, into the objective function of agents? Is that increasingly going to be something that we sort of need to rethink in terms of how we approach this sort of phenomena?
Well, I think about it as a little bit of a reduced form. That is to say, individuals get utility, you might say, out of what they consume, how they interact with different people, a whole set of things about, life. But information affects in a very fundamental way what they consume, what they believe, who they interact with, how they vote, so that information affects the things that people care about. I think it's also true, the point that you just made. I think it is not unreasonable to think that we actually do care about directly the quality of our information ecosystem. But that's not necessary for the results of our paper. Our results of the paper could be put in a more classical form where individuals get utility only out of goods and a variety of interactions. And information makes it possible for them to make better decisions.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions from the audience, please. We have 4 minutes. Mics are going around. I will collect a couple of questions, please.
Hi, my name is Johannes Heidelberg. I'm a regulator from Germany. My question would be, don't the AI providers saw off the branch on which they sit by withdrawing the economic viability of good information producers? And more quickly so will the information degrade more quickly than the equilibrium will be reached?
Another question from there. You raised your hand. Yes, please. And that would be the last one.
Oh, thank you. My name is Meg. I'm from Australia. It's a real honour to hear you speak and to ask a question to a Nobel laureate. So thank you for that presentation. My question is, what has been the response from governments to your paper?
Okay, so Joe, did you get the two questions? One
Yes,
is,
yes.
Yep.
The first question, great question, and I love the metaphor of sawing off the branch that you're sitting on. If there were a monopoly, the monopoly would presumably realize what is going on. I don't want to say that there's a full rationality, but I think this is so obvious that they would figure out that they were sawing off the branch and they wouldn't do it. But we live in a world that maybe monopolies have a lot of bad problems, and we have right now in the AI space a lot of competition, and not only within countries but across countries, and that with that competition, it is very clear that companies like OpenAI do not care about this at all, or very little. And so they're trying to evade responsibility for paying, and therefore they are destroying the sources of information on which they depend. So I find that's why it's not a surprise, given information is a public good, and each of them wants to get it for free because it gives them a competitive advantage. That's what this is all about, and that's where government has to really step in. This is a real case of a misalignment of private incentives with public interest in the context of competition among various AI companies. I think on the second question, I think there is increasing realization that AI is undermining the quality of the information ecosystem. And Australia did some of the first steps with its bargaining code. That's turned out to have more problems in some other countries, partly because the social media and the AI companies have been lobbying with enormous amounts of money against any system that would make them pay for the knowledge that they're stealing from others. So that's really what we're facing now is a political problem, I think, because we have the power. They're making so much profits, and therefore they have, in at least American politics, where money talks, they have so much political power. But it's not only in the United States. They campaigned in Brazil against a law which would have made them pay more for what they were taking from others. And in Canada, they've campaigned consistently around the world. So, while I think I do know that a number of governments, legislatures, there was an attempt to pass a law in California, and they lobbied successfully the governor, and he vetoed the bill. So I think responsible government officials realize the dangers that we're confronting. But we're in the middle of money is that matters, and our politics reflects money, and we're having a political battle. And for me, one of the reasons for writing the paper is to clarify more forcefully the dangers of the road on which we are currently embarked.
Thank you very much indeed. A round of applause for Joe, an intellectual giant.